Well, hi guys, welcome to another Flight Deck to Sim live stream. I hope you can all hear me okay. Please let me know if you can't and I can tweak the volumes. And today we're going to do a flight from London Luton to Jersey. The flight time's about 45 minutes, so quite a short sector. I don't have as much time as I did with my first live stream. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to answer them. Now, for any of you that watched my first live stream, you probably remember I had some issues with OBS crashing. I've done a few more practice live streams. The issue's still persisting. So if that does happen again, all I ask is you to be very patient. All I have to do is reboot OBS, start the stream again. It takes about 30 seconds. It's to do with the way it tracks the mouse and stuff, but the crashes do occasionally happen. But as we say in English, touch wood, and hopefully that won't happen again. So what we're going to do is, just before we get going, we'll talk about where we are, we'll look at the flights and look at the departure, the routing and the arrival into Jersey. Now, for those of you who have probably been looking, Jersey is on the absolute limit for what we can land a 737-800 on. The runway's around 1,600 metres. I've loaded the aircraft to ensure that we're at the maximum landing weight for that runway, so it should be quite interesting. If I land long, we'll have to go around, fly another approach. But the weather en route at the arrival airport's pretty good. So what I'll do first, we'll just bring up the charts, and you can see the routing today. Here's Luton. The departure we're going to fly is the Compton 3 Bravo, which takes us to Compton. Then we're going to fly to the Southampton VOR over the English Channel towards a waypoint called Ortac, and that's the Jersey 1 Alpha arrival. And then when we get to Jersey, we're actually going to fly the procedural approach. So if I close the Luton chart, we'll have a look at this obviously in flight as well. View the charts for Jersey. The arrival is going to take us directly to this beacon here. And then we're going to fly outbound on a track of, what's this track here, 126, round the arc, and then inbound onto the Ils. So it kind of simulates that there's no radar available, which obviously there isn't with me doing a live stream, so I can do a straight-in self-position approach as if there was no radar available in Jersey. So we'll go back to the charts in Luton. I'll show you the departure we're flying today, which is the Compton 3 Bravo. Well, actually, firstly, I'll show you where we're parked. We're on stand 45 here. Push back to face east, and then we'll taxi Delta onto Alpha, and then the runway 26 today, using live weather. Obviously it's a westerly wind, and the landing takeoff performance is full 24k for this runway taking off in this direction. And the SID we're flying is the Compton 3 Bravo, so we're going to climb straight ahead to 1030 feet, make a left turn, intercept the Bovingdon 033 radial. We're going to fly 213 inbound. Then we fly to the Henton NDB, maintaining 5,000 feet initially, and then to the Compton VOR. So that's the SID we're flying. So I'll close the charts and we'll jump into ZIBO's mod. Now, I was talking to ZIBO around 15 minutes ago. I've actually have a pre-release version of the mod, so if I can remember how to get to it, I think it's menu. We're on 3.27G, which is got a few tweaks and changes. Obviously, if those of you who are aware of ZIBO's mod, there's changes all the time, but he's constantly updating it. But it's so good now. There's so many features now. It's getting closer and closer to the real aircraft. So the aircraft's now fully ready for pushback. We're all boarded. We'll get the pushback started. So what we'll do, we'll call up the better pushback crew, start pushback. I've already pre-planned it, so
ground to cockpit.
All ready to go.
Is driving up.
It's incredibly loud in my ear. And we'll call Luton ground, so flight deck to sim, stand 45, request push and start. We'll imagine push and start's been approved. So we'll turn the packs off, isolation valve open. We'll put the APU bleed on. You'll need that if you want to start the engines. Anti-collision light is on, and the transponder to out off. That's it. The before start checklist is now complete. So look at these, some of those questions. GPWS killer, is this called a circling approach? No, this isn't a circling approach. That's not what we're going to do in Jersey. That's a straight-in procedural approach. A circling approach is actually where you position on a different runway and you do a kind of a visual circuit onto a different runway that's on the approach.
All doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
Okay, so he's connecting. Let's have a look outside, see what's going on. So here's my aircraft. I've got to say a massive thanks to the guy who's been designing this for me. If you can find, if you want a copy of this, I can make this available on X-Plane 11 though. It's a really cool paint scheme. It's really cool. So he's pushing back. When the ground crew call up, you confirm that the bypass pin's installed, all the ground equipment's free of the aircraft, and all the doors and hatches are closed, which they are. Madman, don't you turn off hydraulic A system for pushback? Certain airlines do, as an added safety precaution, but if you've got the bypass pin installed, there's no need to take the hydraulic A system pumps
So
off.
connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
Okay, so release parking brake. Oops, me going back to FSX. I tried to
Starting
push the
pushback and you may start engines.
dot, but it didn't work. There we go. So release the parking brake. And off we go. So I've already pre-planned the pushback to face east. There we go. So we can start engine number 2 now. Move the start switch to ground. There we go, have the N2 rotation. Go back to the takeoff page. Let's have a look at the outside. There we go. Wrong engine. There we go. That sounds so cool. I don't know where Audio XP got the audio from, but it sounds so good. There we go. So 25% in. 2. Start lever to idle detent. It's very hard here, but we'd also check the spar valve goes from dim to bright and off in the real aircraft. And now just carefully monitoring the EGT as it increases. Let's have a look outside again. As the engine spools up. There we go. That's so cool. There we go. So 50% N2. Start switch modes to auto or off. Start a cutout. Monitor engine number 2. And for the stabilised engine criteria, we just check that we have 20% N1 approximately, EGT approximately 400 degrees. Fuel flow should be around 300 kilos or so, so it's a little bit less than it is here. Here it should be around 300. And then enter of around 60%. And then the engine is stable. We'll start engine number 1 now. Umut, what have you just asked? What is the job of the flight button in the Boeing 737 located in the engine start panel? Well, by flight, I guess you mean this. Well, it's to be used in heavy rain and severe turbulence. I'll explain why later in a bit more detail.
Set parking brake.
So, parking brake set, start lever to idle
Disconnecting
detent.
tow, stand by.
God, I need to turn down the volume of the better pushback guy. It's really loud. Go, getting load by the pushback crew. Monitoring the engine start. EGT's increasing there. Starter cutout. Start valve open has extinguished. Monitoring engine number 1. Scanning the same engine parameters as well, and that looks like it's stable. We'll blank the lower DU as well. So that's it. One of the things you can actually do, guys, after the pushback, you can put the generators on the bus and the APU off. We don't do anything else though until we see the bypass pin. That just saves a little bit of fuel because 1 minute after you move the switch to off, the APU then shuts down.
Tow is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the left. We'll see you next time and have a safe flight.
There we go. So, tug's now released. In reality, if you've got the better pushback add-on for FSX, you'd know about this. You'd have to wait for the dispatcher to show you the bypass pin, and once you've seen the bypass pin, you can then do the before taxi checklist, which is what we do in my airline. So generators are off, APU is off, start switches to continuous, probes to on, packs in auto, isolation valve auto, APU bleed off, and push recall. Now we can do the flight control test. So full forward, full back, full left, centre, full right, centre, and then the rudders full left, centre, full right, centre. Now in reality the captain holds the tiller so the nose wheel doesn't move to do that. We've pushed recall already, and we'd then complete the before taxi checklist, but hopefully I've done everything correctly and I'll imagine that is now complete. So if I bring up the chart again here, and let's have a look at the taxi routing. So we simply go flight deck to sim, request taxi, and as I mentioned, we're going to taxi from here, Delta, down Delta there, then Alpha 1, and actually we don't need to backtrack here. I've done the performance to ensure that we can take off from the Alpha 1 intersection. So back into the sim, we can now release the parking brake. Let's do a quick configuration warning horn check. Right, what have I forgotten to do? Oh my goodness me, I've done the flap. Forgot to do the flaps. That's really embarrassing. So this is the problem in a desktop simulator. There's only one of you, and then I would have obviously ran the before taxi checklist in this case, which would have spotted I'd forgotten the flaps, but that's because I was too busy talking to you guys, looking at comments and questions. So that's why we do the takeoff configuration warning here on check. So I'll do another check. There we go, the horn's not sounding. Back to around 35% N1, get the aircraft moving. That was very embarrassing. So turn off and taxi lights on as well, just before we get moving. So I'll make a right here onto the taxiway, and then a left turn onto Alpha. Perfect. So obviously I'm using my feet and the rudder pedals, but in reality we don't use the rudder to turn, we just use the tiller. This here on the left hand side. So I'll have a look at some of the questions when we get airborne, otherwise I will concentrate on the taxi initially. And you have the Navigraph charts. It's probably best if you get it up if you want to reference it, because one of the things I found with OBS, and when it crashes, it's usually when I'm moving the mouse around on another application, so I'll only open it occasionally, and hopefully it won't crash at a critical phase. If it crashes now, that's not so bad, but in takeoff, that would be extremely annoying, but touch wood, hopefully that won't happen. So we'll get onto the Alpha taxiway, and then we'll do the before takeoff checklist. And taxi speed, just doing around, we always use ground speed for taxi, we're doing about 12 knots. The maximum taxi speed is actually 30. But you wouldn't go around a corner at 30. The maximum speed around a corner more than 90 degrees is 10 knots, so otherwise you'll be skidding around. Perfect. So the weather conditions in Luton are pretty good. The westerly wind's less than 10 knots, a few overcast clouds around. Just getting the latest weather information actually. Here. Just on my mobile phone whilst taxiing. Obviously wouldn't do that in reality. So Luton, yep, it's westerly wind, 10 kilometres visibility, scattered and broken clouds at 4,000 feet. Temperature's 17 degrees and the QNH is 1014. Okay guys, I hope you're with me. Yeah, as we mentioned already, OBS is being a little bit temperamental, so hopefully, as I said, it won't do it during the takeoff. It just crashed, rebooted it, and now it's back again. I'm probably going to change the streaming software I use to something a little bit more stable in the future. So let me know if you can hear me in the comments section, otherwise I'll pause and carry on. Okay, so we're now going to do the before takeoff checklist, which is on the control column here. So config, we've checked. Flaps, we have 5 required with 5 selected and a green light for the leading edge flaps, and the stab trim is set for takeoff. Now the takeoff briefing, well, we carefully have a look on the air conditioning panel. We've got the packs in auto, the engine bleeds on, the V speeds are set for takeoff. We've got V1 135, VR 136, V2 145 is set. The initial takeoff, then we're going to climb straight ahead to 1,030 feet to make a right turn onto a track of 213 towards the Bovingdon VOR, and then we'll climb to an altitude of 5,000 feet. And the takeoff briefing is complete. So imagine the cabin is secure as well. We've moved the no smoking switch sign to on in my company to remind us the cabin crew are completely ready for departure. And that's it. The before takeoff checklist is complete. Now we just need to get our clearance for takeoff, so we obviously cannot cross this line. This is the whole point until we've been cleared either to line up and wait or takeoff. So imagine we've contacted Luton Tower, flight deck to sim, holding point Alpha 1. We don't need to backtrack for runway 26 because you'd advise them of that in Luton, otherwise you'd have to have better spacing for the aircraft on final. So we'll just do an intersection takeoff. We'll imagine they've also cleared us for takeoff as well. So cleared for takeoff, we can put all the lights on for the retracts and forward facing, strobe lights as well, LNAV auto throttle. Captain will turn the weather radar on and the transponder to TARA, and the first officer will advise the cabin crew to take their seats for departure. So clear left and clear right. Let's line up onto the runway. So, also, the company I work for, whenever we enter an active runway, we have to confirm with the other pilots you have been cleared. So before we even get anywhere near the whole point, captain will ask the first officer, confirm we've been cleared, take off, and the first officer has to respond, yeah, we have been cleared to take off, or no, captain, we haven't been cleared to take off, hold short, just to avoid something called a runway incursion, which is something that could easily happen at a busy airport. You don't want to ever enter a runway if you've not been cleared to. Perfect. So overshooting the line slightly, hopefully that's going to put us on the centre line. Lost a bit of inertia there, so just had a bit more thrust. It's so much more difficult in this simulator compared to when you've got the real aircraft. That's only because I'm used to it. So a little bit more thrust, a little bit uphill here perhaps. There we go, that'll do. Alright, fingers crossed, no crashes from OBS for the next 5 minutes. If it happens in the cruise, it doesn't matter so much, but definitely don't want it to happen now. Alright, let's just see in these comments who's my first officer there. Got the transponder and TARA anyway there, GL, thank you very much. And don't forget the clock, you're quite right. So, we've been cleared takeoff, so checking the latest surface wind pretty much down the runway. So we've got the runway heading of 255, the track's on 252, I'll sort that out in a second, and timing. Just get rid of the control column as well. Okay, so thrust to 40% N1. Obviously you'd push toga on the thrust lever in the real aircraft, but I'm going to use this handy program button here. There we go, stabilised, set takeoff thrust. Light forward pressure on the control column. There we go. Takeoff thrust set and indications are now normal.
80 knots.
80 knots checked, release the forward pressure on the control column. V1, hand off the thrust lever and rotate. Using up all the runway up in Luton, look at that! That was a bit tight. Okay, gear up to 15 degrees initially.
400.
And onto the flight directors. 400 feet, verify the roll mode, which is LNAV. There you go, there's 1,030 feet, there's the left turn.
1,000.
There's 1,000 feet, so we can engage the autopilot just like we would in real life. Command A, and I forgot to mention, guys, Luton is an NADP1 departure, so we're going to maintain this speed of V2 plus 20 until 3,000 feet, and then we'll accelerate the aircraft and retract the flaps on schedule. Good, keeping the heading bug updated. Oops. Okay, so approaching 3,000 feet above aerodrome level, we can now bug the up speeds. And we're just now waiting until we're above the white bug V2 plus 15, and then we can select flaps 1. There you go. So speed checked flaps 1. Approaching 1 to go to the stop altitude for the departure 5,000 feet, and you can see we're inbound to the Bonington VOR already.
1,000 to go.
1,000 to go. There's the 1 bug, so select flaps up. There you can see the Bonington VOR, there's the green arrow, but now we actually want to put the ADF back on as we're flying inbound to the NDB, Headington. Okay, so there we go. Out acquire already, so we can ignore that. Just let the aircraft level off at 5,000 feet initially, which is the stop altitude for the SID. Flaps are up, no lights, so now we can do the after takeoff checklist. So, gear 2 up and off, order brake 2 off. We don't need engine anti-ice at the moment, I don't think we do anyway. Let's have a look at the temperature. Nope, 13 degrees, so that's off. And now we carefully check the air conditioning and pressurization. So, differential pressures 1.0, cabin rate of climb is climbing, auto, bleeds are on, APU bleed off, all in auto, check the duct pressure. And then the temperatures as well, checking the temperatures in the cabin, so that's all good. That's the temperature in the cabin is the forward and after. You can see it's actually about 28 degrees, so what we'd do in reality is turn it down a little bit, otherwise you'd be complaining it's too hot. So after takeoff checklist is now complete, we then confirm the altimeters are correctly set, and that's it. We're just maintaining initially 5,000 feet. So let's have a look at the SID. We'll show you where you are. Bring up the charts, and you can see here, oh, I just need to turn on the follow feature. There we are. You can see here we are inbound to the Henton NDB, and after the Henton NDB we're going to fly towards the Compton VOR. So at this point it's very likely that Luton Tower would hand us over to London Control, and I'll imagine we've done that, and they've now cleared us to climb flight level, let's say 160, just a bit randomly. So that is now set, 160 checked, and we need to delete the altitude restrictions in the FMC, so we just push out into vent once, twice, all the restrictions are now deleted. N1 VNAV speed climbing to 250 knots, accelerating to 250 knots, climbing to flight level 160. So climbing to a flight level, so standard set once, twice, and 3 times. We just then confirm the passing flight level, which is 52 for flight level 160 in this case. And there we are, we're now inbound to Henton and then towards Compton, which is the termination for the SID. Alright, there we are, on top of clouds, so we don't need the engine anti-ice on as we climb any further. So let's have a look at some of these questions. GPWS killer, why not Essex radar instead of London? That's a good question. Maybe it might be Essex radar. I have flown from Luton before, but many years ago, and it would have probably been Essex radar, maybe London. I can't remember off the top of the head, but yes, standard would typically be Essex radar and Luton. I'm not too sure. Dan, hi, I have a question about the ignition starters. GPU's killer told me the R ignition is for the first engine start of the day. Now, there's some confusion about this with a lot of people. So, each engine has 2 igniters, one left and one right. And the right igniter has a different source of electricity than the left igniter. I think the right igniter is I can't remember off the top of my head. It's a standby electrical system, and the left igniter uses the AC transfer bus. Now this is all real technical stuff. We typically leave it on the right igniter for the first flight of the day, and then we switch it to the left when returning, just to check both of them. But it's a real technical reason behind it, detailed in FCOM 2 of the manual, which you can look up before. And I can't try and explain it any more simpler than that, I'm afraid. So, passing flight level 100 for 160, we can now do the pre-cruise checks. So, retracts and taxi light off. Actually, that usually comes up when we do move the gear up. We'll turn all the lights off now as well. Fuel is good as well, 4 pumps, no fuel in the centre tanks. APU is off. Pressurisation, again, every 10,000 feet, carefully checking this. We've got differential pressure, and the cabin altitude is climbing. All the switches are good as well. Seatbelts, well, imagine we release the cabin crew, and we can release the passengers now as well. And we just do a recall as well. That's it, the pre-cruise checks are now complete. So, just to make it as easy as possible, we'll imagine we've been cleared to our final cruise level, which is quite low today, just flight level 220. So that is now set, 220 checked, and we just check that's correct. Yep, 220 there, 220, check the overhead panel for the pressurisation, set 3 times as well. And another thing we do in the real aircraft too, if I can remember the button to get to the radio panel, there we go, we make sure we're monitoring the frequency 121.5, and you'd push this button here to monitor that frequency, which is the emergency frequency. Gary Evans, does the Copilot have to do most of the flight? Well, we would alternate depending on the sector, so typically depending on what airline you fly for and what sort of route structure you have. If you're doing a 2-sector day, typically either the captain or first officer would fly out, and then the other pilot would fly back, and the roles would be pilot flying and pilot monitoring, but the workload's equally distributed between the 2 pilots, but ultimately the captain has the final responsibility of the safety of the aircraft. Mr. Rubber Duck 104 UK, love it. Is it standard when being cleared to flight level rather than the transition altitude? Yes, for the airline I work for, our SOPs, as soon as you've been cleared to a flight level and you are being cleared above the transition altitude, you can set standard straight away, not necessarily above it. So you can actually be below the transition altitude and still set standard as long as you've been cleared to climb above it. In that case, that's because if you forget to set standard and you end up leveling off with the QNH set, you can end up having an altitude bust. Good, so it's a really short cruise actually, getting up to Compton. I think the cruise is around 100 miles or so it's only around 15-20 minutes, and we'll get the aircraft set up for the approach into Jersey. I did get a copy of the operational flight plan, but you can see here if I bring up the charts again, what we'll do is look at our progress along the route. We'll get rid of Luton now, so we don't need to go there anymore. See where we are. There we are. So we're just approaching Compton, which is the termination of the SID, and we're already approaching our cruise level, and then we'll be routing to Southampton VOR next, and then over the Isle of Wight, and then the English Channel. You've got the island of Alderney, which definitely can't take a 737. I've flown in there before many years ago in a Seneca. Guernsey, and then Jersey, which is the main Channel island here, just off the Cherbourg Peninsula of France. There we go. So, approaching flight level 200 again, the pilot monitoring will carefully check the air conditioning and pressurization panel, and the main thing you're looking at here is the big needle. This is the differential pressure. If this is on 0, that means the aircraft is not pressurized, so if this needle starts decreasing, you need to think about descending very quickly, or perhaps trying to manually pressurize the aircraft using manual here. Bradley Lewis, hello. Who performs the walk around on the return leg? Well, it'll be the pilot monitoring, as Z Muffman has just correctly answered for you, so absolutely. So, approaching 1 to go, we need to now slow our rate of climb down. So when we have 1 to go, we want to do no more than 1,000 feet per minute, because if there was traffic at flight level 230, you might get a traffic advisory or something called a TA. Good. There we go, overhead the Compton VOR now, and actually what we can do, so we're now overhead the Compton VOR, I've already got the Jersey VOR on standby, so we can tune those up, and then as we get closer, well look, it's already picking up the Jersey VOR, 138 miles away, because it's such a short sector. Perfect, so, won't mess around, what we'll do, we'll start setting up for the ILS approach straight away. So if I bring up the charts for you, OVS, and the charts, and what we'll do is we'll show you the ILS chart first, and then I'll set it all up. So view charts in Jersey, and then the one we're interested in is this one. Well, I'll show you the arrival. The arrival's very simple. It's ORTAC, Angler, and then direct to Jersey. And then from Jersey, as I mentioned at the start of the stream, we're going to fly outbound from this point here to 8.5 miles left turn, then back overhead the beacon, and then onto the ILS, and this is where the runway is here. So all this information I need to set into the aircraft, so I need to set the ILS frequencies, the final approach track, the minimums, and we'll just brief the missed approach as well. So we'll shut the charts off for that, and hopefully you've got a copy at home so you can follow me through. So we'll imagine that the pilot flying has handed over controls to pilot monitoring to set up the approach, and going to the cruise page, descent page. Hopefully, I think ZIBO was mentioning this should have been updated, but this will be changing to 250 below 100 soon, so the correct coding isn't quite there yet. So we'll put the forecast winds in. Well, because we're already at flight level 220, I don't need too much information, so all I'm going to do is put the flight level 100 winds in. So I'm just looking at the operational flight plan now, and the forecast winds at flight level 100 are 260 at 20 knots, 28 knots figures, yeah, 260 at 28, so flight level 100, 260 at 28 knots, and what we'll do, I'll just get the latest weather in Jersey to get the QNH, and I've got the 4-letter code for Jersey now, Echo Golf Juliet Juliet, and I'm just on my phone whilst I'm doing this, guys, and the local QNH in Jersey is 1017, so you can Okay guys, hopefully you're back with me. Let me know if you can't hear you. Sorry about that. That's the second crash today, so I'll unpause the sim now. Exactly where we were, so I was just setting the QNH for Jersey, which was 1017, and I think I'm going to have to change from OBS. This is very annoying when it crashes. And the temperature in Jersey is 16 degrees, so it's 1 degree above ISA. I can put 1 there. Is it? Don't know if it's implemented yet with the mod. No, not yet, but we can disregard that. Cool, so next we want the fix rings in to help us configure for the approach. Runway 26, and we'll have a 10-mile ring, and it's going to be VMC down in Jersey, so we'll do a 4-mile ring. This is the point where I plan to select gear down at flat 15, okay? Right, let's now set up the ILS. So we need the frequency 110.3 and the final approach track, which is 264. So 110.3. I'm just going to leave it on standby initially so we can keep the Jersey VOR tuned as we fly inbound. So there's the ILS frequency, and the final approach track, as we mentioned, was 264. So onto the MCP. 264. And the minimums, just get the charts open on my iPad as well, so I don't have to make reference there. Well, I'll have a look on the chart so you can see anyway, guys. So there we go, you can see the minimums are 471 feet, so that's the minimums there. So I'll get rid of the charts, and when you set the minimums, these are what we call barrow minimums. Radio is what we use for Cat 2 and Cat 3 approaches. So 471 feet. Hold this button down, should be a little quicker. There we go, and that's 200 feet above the aerodrome level, which is the standard height for a Cat 1 ILS minimums. We can also preset the QNH as well, which is 1017, which is there too. We'll do that on the first officer side too. Oh, it's there too, 1017. That's it. So the minimums are set, the ILS frequencies and courses are tuned, and the missed approach, if I bring up the chart again, you can see here. So we're going to fly, as I said, inbound to Jersey VOR, and we'll select flap 1 and flap 5 before the VOR, and then we're going to fly outbound to 8.5 miles from the runway here. So you can see we're actually intercepting 5.5 miles away from the ILS. Usually the beacon's over the field, but in this case it's not. There's a really short leg here, 5.5 to 8.5 miles. That's just 3 miles, and then we make a left turn onto the localizer, and that initial track we're flying, Category C aircraft, which is what the 737 is. So you see the 1 here, and then the 1, we're going to fly this track here of 126, and then inbound onto the ILS. We've got the altitude distance cross checks on the chart here as well. So if we check the FMC just to make sure it's all set up correctly, go to the legs page and then to plan, and we'll zoom in slightly. There we go. So you can see there's the Jersey VOR. Zoom in a little bit more for you. You can see there's the Jersey VOR, there's that track I mentioned, 126, just for a distance of 3.5 miles. I put 200 knots, you've got a 185 knot speed restriction as well for that turn onto base legs, so we'll definitely have flat 5 there. And then we'll make a turn onto the localizer. Now, ZIBO's mod obviously hasn't got the curved lines program, but the aircraft does perform correctly. Hopefully in time we'll see the curved lines. And then we'll establish ourselves onto the localizer and then onto the ILS as well. For some reason, I think this is a bit of a glitch. We've got a glide path angle of 1.05 degrees. It shouldn't be the case, it should be 3, but not sure why that's there. Now, let's talk about the biggie today, which is the big threat with Jersey. It is such a short runway. Actually, the landing distance, I'll show you if I bring up the charts. There we go. Make sure you've got an OBS here. If we go to this one here, which is the runway information, runway 26, you can see the runway is only 1,706 metres. Now, if I look at the landing distance available beyond the threshold for runway 26, it's only 1554, and that's the full length of the runway from here to here. Now, I'm actually going to plan for max auto brake, and I've done the landing calculation for max auto brake. It is actually quite a short distance. It says in the Boeing OPT app with max auto brake I should stop in 1,200 meters. So max auto brake is seldom used. I've used it before a few times on the line. One of the airports I've done it is Leeds Bradford in the United Kingdom, which has a very short runway, and typically you do use max auto brake on the line occasionally. And hopefully if that works we should be able to make Delta, but if not we will have to vacate at the end of the runway. And then taxiing, we'll taxi in via Delta or Alpha Bravo, and we'll just pick one of the stands on the apron here. And that's about it really. So let's check our progress. You can see here we're just approaching the English Channel, so we'll look at our left hand side in a second. We should see the Isle of Wight, and then continuing towards Ortac for the descent very shortly. Cool, so we'll get rid of that, and this back to Jersey, click this, look at the charts again. Oh, that's not working for some reason, I'm not sure. Not to where I can do it this way. View charts, there we go. So there we go, we'll bring the chart up so I can make reference to it on the approach. So that's it, so we've discussed the landing performance. Obviously that's going to be flat 40 as well, auto brake to maximum 2. So we go back to map, and back to X-Plane 11, and as I said we're going to burn about 400 kilos of fuel. We've got 3.7 on the board at the moment, we've got 3.3 when we arrive into Jersey, so that's only 400 kilos to go. We can take 400 kilos off our gross weight now, so that's 62.1, which is what I use for our landing calculation. And as I said, it will be flat 40, auto brake to maximum, and second detent reverse thrust to stop the aircraft. And that's it, everything is done before top of descent. So at this point the pilot monitoring would hand over control back to pilot flying, and he would then call for the descent checklist, which is here on the control column. So descent checklist, pressurization, we've got the land altitude set. Yes, the elevation in Jersey is 277 feet, so we've got 300 set there. And the anti-ice is off. Approach briefing of fuel we've discussed, and the IS and altitude bugs we've got the VREF set and the minimums too, and the QNH. Now the FO would also independently set that too, and set the minimums, but because it's only me I only need to set it on the left hand side. That's it, so the descent checklist is complete. So just looking at some of the questions here, scrolling up back. Obviously this is such a short flight, probably haven't had as much time to answer some, so sorry about this. Have a go at this. Who's asked this? Someone asked, is PMDG better than the ZIBO mod? I get this asked probably about 10 times a day on the comments on my channel. Guys, I genuinely have no preference. PMDG is obviously excellent, it's got all the systems fully modelled, it's a finished product, but what do I prefer? It's the ZIBO mod 100%, because it just handles manually really well, and it utilises the what I think is the better flight model in X-Plane 11. Since I started using the ZIBO mod 3 months ago, the way it's progressed is just phenomenal. I really enjoy flying it and doing these flights, and it's still a few quirks here and there, and there's occasional things that need changing. The flight model's still getting refined, but it's so good, and it's completely free, so I'm trying to expose as many people, because I used to be a massive simmer, as you all well know obviously, and the ability to have something like this completely free is just beggars belief really. I mean, if I had this 20 years ago when I started flight simming, I wouldn't believe it. Cool. Let's have a look at some of the other questions. Got quite a few here. Yes, Seaman, it is also free, absolutely. Mert Errol, show us your joystick sensitivity settings. Yeah, I'll do that there. I think it's all set to the standard ones. I haven't really tweaked it that much. It's because I'm just using I'm using a really cheap joystick. It's a Logitech Extreme 3D Pro. It's about 6 years old, but it just gets the job done. But I'll post that on my Facebook page, all my joystick settings. If you're interested, you can have a look there. So there we go. Reset MCP altitude, approaching top of descent. So we'd now probably been handed over to Jersey approach at some point, or probably still with London, but Jersey approach later. And we'll just imagine we'll go flight deck to sim, request descent. So let's keep it nice and simple, give us a nice low cruise level. So imagine being cleared to descend to flight level 80 initially. So that's set, 80 is checked. We can gauge VNAV, and all you need to simply do is push outer to vent. The aircraft is just going to descend initially at 1,000 feet per minute, and then it will just capture the vertical profile, and then it'll go to idle thrust. So there we go, vertical profile's coming in. As soon as we hit it, this will go to retard and then arm, hopefully. No, not quite. Keep an eye on it. Should do in a second. Anyway, in VNAV path, it's just following this. It's closing the thrust levers now, and then there we go. It should go retard and arm first, but it's gone straight to arm. And now we're on an idle path descent, just carefully monitoring the speed, which can go up and down. So, AUTAC's the start of the arrival. And looks like VNAV's behaving itself today, as it sometimes in real life it doesn't maintain speed, but you can see how it's just trying to hold the target speed of 280 knots. But because we've got accurate information in the FMC, it's doing a reasonably good job. So let's bring up the charts again. There's the ILS charts. And we'll bring up the star chart. There we go. We're just coming into view, going into towards AUTAC, and then we're going to go southbound over the English Channel. So you've got the island of Alderney straight ahead of us, and then we'll be continuing towards Angler, and then direct to the Jersey VOR as well. Cool. Let's have a look outside. This is why also I like X-Plane 11, just from a kid's point of view. There, that's so cool. There's the aircraft descending idle thrust. And guys, this is just default X-Plane 11. There's nothing special here. This is just a few plugins. I think the only plugins I've got are ones that you suggested back to me. So I'll go plugins here. I've got better pushback, the head shake one, and the terrain radar. Otherwise, it's just default X-Plane 11, which is the beauty of this sim. You don't need to spend hundreds of pounds on expensive modifications to make it look good. Cool, so already approaching 150. At this point we put the seatbelt sign on. That tells the cabin crew we have approximately 15 minutes to landing. So I was just reading some of the comments, and there we are approaching AUTAC. So you can see we've got the Jersey VOR tuned on the pedestal here. We've got 112.2, and we've got the VOR here. And this is really good as a raw data backup. If we were to lose the FMC, we could just simply fly to the VOR raw data. We've got both the VORs tuned. There's the green needle pointing at it, and you've also got the RMI pointing at it to go as well. And you can tell which radial you're always on, because if you look at the tail of the needle, that's the radial you're on. So we're currently on the 005 radial from Jersey. And also if you go to centre, you can see here tail of the green needle is also on 005 as well. Well, about 010 here, but it's close enough. Cool. So again, VNAV's descending, it's behaving itself nicely, and our next waypoint restriction is going to be overhead Jersey VOR 200 knots at or above 3,000 feet. Now, using a rough rule of thumb, I can work out if we're getting a bit, well, actually, yeah, I think we're getting a bit low here. So if you see Jersey, we're 63 miles away. Now if you times that by 3, that's going to be 18,000 feet, and we're at 14,000 feet, so we're about 4,000 feet low on profile. Now, I think this is to do with the way ZIBO mod currently programs altitude restrictions. So if I press delete here temporarily, it's got us there at 220, which is definitely not correct, so it might be a bit of an issue here. So I'm actually going to ignore VNAV for a second, guys. So, as I said, it's just 3 times your height, 6, 12, 18. I should be at 18,000 feet. I'm at 14,000 feet, so quite low there. Some of these comments, Norse number 3.27G dang, you only have 3.27F. Yeah, I've spoke to ZIBO this morning. I'm on Discord with him, and he's actually just this is a pre-release version of the mod, so I do a lot of testing for ZIBO's mod to make sure the systems work. I do test flights and give them some feedback, so hopefully this version will be with you very shortly. So as I said, I hope you understand what I'm doing here. I'm ignoring VNAV. That's because I'm getting quite low. VNAV's only accurate if the information in the FMC is accurate, and because it's putting these heights at slightly differently. I just wanted to see where, yeah, 220 above. It's not programming the descent 100% correctly. As I said, this is still a work in progress, the mod, so there's a few tweaks here that need to be done. Cool. So still descending to flight level 80, just checking how high we should be, 54 miles, we should be around 15,000 feet, we're at 13,000 feet, so ignoring this completely now, and I'm trying, as you probably are aware of all my tutorials, to maintain a continuous descent. The whole idea is we don't want to try and level off. Now, above the transition altitude, that's not an issue, but when you are descending close to the airfield, a lot of airports monitor you for continuous descent compliance. Alright, so if you are levelling off at very low altitudes, you know, you're not maintaining a CDA, and certain airports actually fine airlines or provide warnings to airlines if their pilots don't maintain continuous descent. So I don't think it'd be an issue in Jersey, but certainly at airports where it's noise sensitive, in capital cities, major airports, they're definitely monitoring this CDA compliance. What other questions do we have? Zima for man, what's the major changes in this version? Yeah, these ever since 3.27. It's only been minor bug fixes. I mean, many of the new features, the clock's fully working now. Some of the feedback I gave there. ZIBO's doing a lot of work on the duct pressures and the air conditioning panel to make sure this is realistic, which is far better now. Some tweaks to the flight model. Flight model with the flaps up now, the drag curve is really, really realistic. It's really, really good. But certainly at the moment with the flaps, it's a little bit, it's not as draggy as it should be with flaps. So finding with flap 5 on an ILS, it's a little bit too slippy, but Twerks is making some changes to the flight model to fix that. Conspiracy Uncensored, can you please just end the debate and confirm that X-Plane is better than P3D? Well, it's obviously my own personal point of view. I still use FSX Steam occasionally, which is the same sort of flight dynamic as P3D, but I can tell you from my experience, I've been flying aircraft for 15 years now, it's better in X-Plane. Just the way aircraft handles with the flight dynamics, the way it seems to simulate airflow, and there's lots of secondary effects in flight lore, and it seems to replicate that really nicely. Things like ground effect. Yeah, for me it's X-Plane 11. Cool. So again, carefully monitoring the vertical profile here. 42, 4812, so around 12,000 feet. So I am capturing the profile. I'm completely ignoring VNAV here because I am getting quite low. Ideally, we want to be flying overhead Jersey VOR at approximately 6,000 feet. Alright. This is saying 3,000 feet or above, but if I delete this, it should be something like 5.5, 6,000 feet. It's saying flight level 220, so it definitely shouldn't be overhead Jersey VOR at flight level 220, otherwise we're going to be a little bit high. Vincent Billard's ETA, well, let's have a look on the progress page. ETA is 11:02 Zulu, so in 12 minutes, pretty close now. So, approaching flight level 100, we'd usually wait until that height, but we do the post-cruise checks, which I can do now. Fuel, we have 4 pumps. Lights, we can turn on the fixed landing light and turn off lights. APU is off. We check the angular bank selectors, make sure it's set to 25 degrees. And pressurization, again, checking. Differential pressures dropping as we descend, that is set. Verify the seatbelts are on, and we push recall. And we'd remind the cabin crew that we have approximately 10 minutes to landing. So again, 3 times your height, 36, so that's going to be 10,500 feet, so we're about 10,000. So we're getting about to the point where we're back on profile now. Oh, sugar me, I haven't been concentrating, look. Level, just going to put the VS to -100 because we can't do more than 250 knots, so that's just me not paying attention. But you can see here, if we do this on the line actually, if VNAV isn't complying with 250 knots, we just reduce the rate of descent to a really low number to get the speed below 250. And as soon as we're at 250 knots, what I'm going to do is select level change. There we go, that'll do. Level change, 250 knots, idle thrust. Cool, so we can now imagine we've contacted Jersey Approach and they've told us to descend to 3,000 feet, which is the height of the beacon. So 3,000 feet is now set, and we need to set the local QNH, which is 1017. So once, twice, and on the standby altimeter here 3 times. So passing 9,700 for 3,000 feet, and we have no warning flags, and the standby altimeter is set, so that's it. So now we're getting close to the approach. We can ditch the Jersey VOR because obviously we've got the FMC, but we would obviously switch to it if we lost it. So we can tune the ILS now, 110.3, and as we get closer we'll get that identified. So 3 times your height, 30,000 feet 9, so we are pretty much on profile. So again, VNAV showing us that we're 3,000 feet high. Don't be fooled by that. It's only accurate if it's working correctly. Sometimes in the real aircraft as well it can play up, so we revert to old school mathematics. 3 times your height is going to give you your approximate distance, and you also add some additional nautical miles if you need to slow down, and also if you have tailwinds. But I have a descent tutorial which covers most of that there. Cool. So hopefully you see this decel point here. That's the point at which we'll start slowing down. And as I said, we'll hopefully maintain a continuous descent, and if you remember rightly, we're going to fly overhead Jersey VOR, 4 miles this way, and then a 180-degree turn onto the ILS to a landing. And it's pretty cloudy here over the Channel Islands, can't see anything out the window, but Jersey is over there somewhere in the distance. Cool, so actually might be getting a little bit high here. 25, 50, 75, 78, yeah, a little bit high. So what I'm actually going to do, start slowing down now. I'm actually just going to use speed brake just to get to the upspeed a little bit quicker. All right. So as I said, I'm having to completely manually work out my position in descent. So in level change, it shouldn't really level off there. It should at least command a very slight descent. Well, it is, to be fair. It should be doing around 500 feet per minute, but it hasn't leveled off. And as soon as we get to the upspeed, what it does in level change, it just pitches. See the FMA in here, pitches MCP speed. It'll just pitch for the upspeed of 208 knots. Cool. So I'm planning to pass over Jersey VOR at around 6,000 feet, so we're in a good position here. So just trying to maintain a continuous descent, keeping an eye on the total air temperature. If we go into cloud and it's below 10 degrees, we need to turn the icing on. It's looking okay for now. Good. So as we fly overhead to Jersey VOR, if you remember on the chart, which I'll bring up slowly, which I haven't been looking at obviously, here you go, you can see we're approaching Jersey VOR. If we go to the, oh, you can see on the ILS chart, so we're going to fly over here 3,000 feet, we can then descend to 2,000 feet past the beacon, and then we'll hopefully capture the ILS at this point here, but you can keep an eye on the chart. I'll bring it up a few times on the approach so you can see where we are. So looking good now, ILS is just becoming unidentified, so we can do the approach checklist. We've got the frequencies for the ILS, the range rings are in for runway 26, we have the identification, we could arm the standby approach on the ISFD, and the courses are set for the runway 264, 264, so the approach checklist is complete. Good. So yeah, VNAV again, it's not showing accurate guidance, there's nothing I've missed here, they're all at or above, so it should be showing you the correct descent. So we're just looking at this completely normally. Alright, so I'm going to start slowing down because we want to have 185 knots before we get to 4 miles. There's the left turn over the beacon. So we'd now, obviously in reality, we'd say flight data sim, over approaching Jersey VOR, and then Jersey Tower would have been handed over, they would have gone. Flight data sim, you're cleared for the straight in procedural approach to the VOR ILS DME runway 26. Oops, got a problem with X-plane, never mind. Cleared straight in for the VOR ILS runway 26, report turning final. Alright, so that's what we'd request. Okay, so flap 1. We have, I'm going to go straight to flap 5 and bug 185 knots, which is the speed restriction. Still got the speed brake extended because I just want to monitor our vertical profile. And we're just going there. looking good. I said 3 times your height, 13 miles, so 13, 26, 39, so I'm a little bit high still, but we've got speed brake and flat 5, 185 knots. That's going to really help us to get back onto profile. And there we go. If I bring up the chart again, you can see, look, there we go, speed restriction. Here, max 185 knots for the base turn, so we're already doing 185 knots, there's the base turn there, so we're complying with all the speed restrictions for the approach as well, which is good. There we go, now turning on to final, just carefully monitoring everything. Oops, I forgot we can now descend to 2,000 feet, it's just entering cloud as well, but the temperature's 12 degrees, we're not in icing conditions, and hopefully we'll roll out roughly onto the localizer and glide path as well. Set runway heading, and as I've already mentioned, the ZIBO mod doesn't depict the curved line, but the aircraft is flying the curved line really accurately. So, I said 3 times your height, 11, so you should be around 3,300, or a bit high, but obviously we're just outside of 10 miles. And the ILS glide path should show when we're within 90 degrees of the ILS. Hopefully it doesn't overshoot the localizer. It should be increasing the bank angle a little bit more. Just going to select vertical speed now. Oh, look at that. It's just some stuff you just cannot teach, guys. Go on the glide path, alright. That was more luck than judgment, alright. So I'm now using vertical speed to descend on the ILS, and note that we haven't levelled off at all since we started the descent. So wing cleared approach, arm approach, localizer glide slope capture, set runway heading, and the missed approach altitude is 3,000 feet. And we're already at the flat 5 speed there. That's it. So here we are, bring up the charts. You can see we've ILS is nicely coming in, 264, overhead the Jersey VOR will go, and then onto the ILS, so you're just going to carefully monitor speed all the way to touchdown. And yet we'll disconnect shortly above minimums and try and land on one of the shortest runways a 737-800 can do. So it's just overshot the localizer slightly, it'll get back on there. So it's holding the speed quite nicely with flat 5. See how it's accelerating ever so slowly. Now if it's doing that, I'm just going to use flat 10, same speed as flat 5, just to make sure the speed's under control. But we've got a good headwind on final, which is really helping us control our speed. So I have been looking at some of the questions, guys, but I will concentrate on the approach, and then when we get on stand I'll answer any questions you might possibly have. As I said, it's only just a short live stream today. So flap 10, terrain noted, so flap 10, nicely on speed, on a localizer, on approach, and then we'll start configuring just before 4 miles, because I've got to get flat 40 out, and to get flat 40 out you need to be below 162 knots. So you can see here, flat 40, 162, and to help the aircraft slow down we might use flat 25, so we'll probably configure at 5 miles today as opposed to 4. Good. Imagine being cleared to land as well. Oh, better just check the surface wind in. Oh, I've got important updates apparently. Oh, great. That's all I wanted. We'll do those later. So hopefully you can still see it. I just got a silly little update from Windows. So being cleared to land, surface wind is in, and I forgot to configure. Look, so gear down, flap 15, match speed, and I'm going to go straight to flap 25. Do a landing checklist to flap, so start switches, continuous, oops, recall is checked, speed brake, armed green lights, landing gear is down 3 green, order brake is set to max, just holding on the landing flap. So we can now select the flap 40, match speeds, and latest wind in Jersey 210 at 12 knots, so just a final approach speed correction of VRF plus 6. So flaps, we've got 40 required, 40 selected green lights, the landing lights are all on, we have been cleared to land. Alright, so all good to go, wish me luck. Hopefully we won't smash it in and I won't float and go off the edge of the runway on the other end. So we'll now disconnect everything. And and hopefully OBS won't crash. So this is another thing I love about ZIBO. The attitude and thrust setting I've got right now is exactly what we'd have for this configuration and gross weight. It's just matching what we'd have. Well, maybe the attitude's a little higher than it would be. So getting a little low on the ILS, so just pitching up slightly. Top of the amber bar, we're fully stabilised.
500.
Checked.
500.
Checked. I think that's just the radio altimeters.
Terrain.
Alright, that's a that's a hard terrain
300.
warning. That would require the mandatory terrain escape manoeuvre in real life, but
200.
I'll ignore that and put it down to a glitch in the sim.
Minimum.
Minimums continue. Oh, it's such a short runway.
100. 50. 40. 30.
Check,
20.
close, hold the attitude. In the touchdown, a bit firm, but that's a good landing for this sort of runway. So speed brake up, reverses. And look at the auto brake working well. So going to start braking manually.
80 knots.
Missed the first exit. There we go. And that was with max auto brake. So yeah, you can see that was actually really close to what you'd get with the real aircraft. Actually, you'd then disengage the maximum auto brake because it is very aggressive in the real aircraft. Cool. So we'll stow the reversers, stow the speed brake, and we'll vacate here at the end of the runway in Jersey. Yeah, you don't want to go off the end of the runway here because you've got a fence and then a cliff. That's pretty nasty. There we go. And vacate at the end. Select flaps to up. Cool. So onto the taxi line, and I will try and clean up the aircraft whilst taxiing as well, and then we'll look at some of the questions you might have had. So transponder to alt off, trim goes to 4 units, trim's all working quite nicely well in the ZIBO Mod 2, flaps are up, speed brake is stowed, select hydraulics, check the pressures, they're all okay, back to engine, flight directors off, bug 100 knots, and we set the altitude to plus 100 feet to remind us we've not got our departure clearance. Flight directors are already off, lights, retracts would come off, and fixed landing lights, this will go to steady, and start switches in auto, and the probes, well, hopefully I'm not off the end. Oh, that's one of the problems with a single pilot simulator. Cool, so that's it. So confirm the recall, that will be master caution, anti-ice for the probes being off, and then the captain would turn off the weather radar. That's it, that's how we clean up the aircraft. So we're just going to taxi onto the nearest stand we get to, make a right turn. Actually, what I'll do is bring up the charts, let's have a look what we have. Just going to move this out of the way so we can actually see what I'm doing, guys. There we go. And let's have a look at the ground chart. So you can see we've vacated here at the end at Bravo, in via the north apron, and annoyingly on the parking stands, doesn't show you where you are, but we're just going to park on one of the stands here on the north. We're just coming in on Juliet now as we speak. Cool. Better start the APU as well. Oopsie daisy. There we go, APU. Start, and we'll just take this left here, whatever stand this is. So only can pull onto stand if you've got the marshaller. Imagine he's there waving us on. There you go, flight time was probably about 42 minutes after we touched down with the taxi as well. So imagine we've been waved on, and there we go. We'll now bring it to a stop and set the parking brake. So let's have a look at the APU starting. Obviously with the ZIBO mod, at the moment when you set the parking brake, you always have the GPU available. So you could put that now on the bus now and shut it down, but we'll just wait for the APU to start. And then we'll look at some of your questions you might have had. Yeah, landing was okay actually, a little bit firm, but that's the sort of landing you want to do on a runway like that. You don't want to mess around and float down, you want to get the wheels on the touchdown zone, which I think is what I managed. So, APU is on the bus, we've got 2 generators on, parking brake set, engines dead, oops, there we go. First we'll do is let the passengers go. And do a PA, cabin crew to disarm the slides, open doors. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jersey. Arriving on time. And we'll just do the transit shutdown flow, which is open. Oh yeah, we turn these off, turning on to stands. And voice recorder we'd turn on as well. There isn't there, just waiting now for the N2 to drop below 20%. There it is, anti-collision light off, and there you go. We are all finished and complete. There it is, arrived on time, on schedule, with no crashes, no serious incidents or anything like that as well. So just before we do anything, just have a look at the replay of the landing, which would be quite good to do. So flight replay mode, let's have a look externally, because that's the only best way to do it. So replay it from about here, and then we'll go on to an external view. That's the best one to have. Let's have a look at the landing as well. So there we are, approaching the lights. There wasn't much of a crosswind actually, I think it was about 5 knots or so. This is another reason why I love X-Plane 11. This replay tool is such a powerful feature. It just replays absolutely every element of what you just did. Ultimate spotter's location. See how firm it actually was. Should have done a little bit of right rudder to correct. That was not too bad. Little bounce, speed brakes up on the centre line pretty much. I'll take that. I'll take that. Cool. So we'll finish the replay, and there we go, back into the flight deck. Cool. So that was about it. I'll just have a look at some of the questions. Thanks for the comments regarding the landing. Gary Evans, is it always a manual landing you do? Yeah, most of the time, if it's a Cat 1 ILS or a non-precision approach or an RNAV approach, yeah, we always disconnect, usually just above minimums or after minimums to continue. You can fly manually all the way down to 158 feet, and then we only do auto lands for Cat 2, Cat 3. Well, you can do an auto land on any ILS approach, but you can only do practice auto lands if it's not authorised for Cat 2 or Cat 3. GPWS Killer, do magenta lines look this sharp in real life? No, as I said a few times in the stream, in reality they're quite curved. It's something hopefully ZIBO will work on in the future, but I think it's very difficult to implement. But the actual aircraft is turning as if the magenta line was there. Okay. What else do we have here? Mr. Rubber Duck 104 UK, why does the approach light not illuminate on the ILS? That's a really good question. So a lot of people think the light, so if I was to, for example, well, I'll turn the flight directors on, look. Now let's imagine I selected a mode like VS, okay. Now there's only one thing this light means. The light means that all you can do is to push it to deselect it. It doesn't mean it's engaged. Now to know which mode is engaged, there's only one thing you must check, and that's the FMAs. Now when you're on an ILS approach, you have forelock and GS here. You cannot actually deselect an ILS on this, so the light's blank. So the only way you know it's engaged is checking the FMAs. So that's it. You can't actually, to deselect an ILS, there's only a few things you can do. One is push TOGA, 2 is to detune the ILS on the nav frequencies, or 3, recycle the flight directors. So that's why that doesn't illuminate. Everett de Boer, what do you set standard for bank angle? So yeah, below 30,000 feet we have that angular bank selector to 25 degrees, and then above 30,000 feet we set it to 10 degrees, because in heading select at very high altitude, at high gross weights, where you're approaching something called coffin corner, you can actually exceed the minimum angular bank, and if you increase your angular bank you have to increase your lift, and if you increase your lift you have to increase your attitude, and the stalling angle at high altitude is a lot lower than it is at a lower altitude, so that in a nutshell we limit the angular angle to prevent the aircraft from getting into a nasty situation. What other questions do we have here? So Martin did answer the question for Mr. Rubber Duck, thanks for that. Drevel166, smoking is switched off. Well, yeah, as I've mentioned a few of my other streams, that no smoking switch we use in the company I work for to determine the position of the cabin. The light, that no smoking, is permanently on. You can't actually turn it off or on, so that the switch is just disconnected from the aircraft system. We just use it as a position to confirm the condition of the cabin. Are the cabin crew seated, or are they secure for landing? That's it. What other questions do we have? A few. That's about it, really. Dan, when would you use control wheel steering? So I will do a tutorial on this because a lot of people asked. Control wheel steering, I have never selected it on the real aircraft. It essentially turns the 737 into an Airbus, and when you set your attitude, let go of the control column, it holds the attitude. Now, one situation in reality when we'd use this is in severe turbulence. In severe turbulence, your altitude and airspeed can fluctuate quite a lot. So we engage control wheel steering, let the hold the attitude, disconnect the autothrottle, hold the thrust, and then just ride out the severe turbulence. Okay. That is about it then. Okay, so guys, I hope you enjoyed that. It's a really short live stream today because I am busy this afternoon. It's just a little bit of spare time I managed to gather. If you are interested, the next tutorial I'm going to do is one I actually don't have, and that's a cold and dark setup in the ZIBO mod. It's something we can just talk about all the way from cold to dark, the full setup. I'm going to show you every single element of the setup that I base it on the company I work for. We'll show you the operational flight down, I'll show you the Boeing OPT performance app, and I'll actually put on the community tab, you know, where would you like me to simulate the flight. Actually, it will be no flight, just a cold and dark setup, but if there's a particular SID you want me to do, I'll put a post on the community tab, some sort of poll, and then you can vote which airport I fly from. Anyway, as I said, I hope you found that interesting and learned something new. As I said, we'll do the cold and dark setup, and then we'll do another live stream after that, probably in around 3 or 4 weeks time. But I am getting to a very busy period at work at the moment. I work a lot of days on, typically 5 or 6 days in a row, and then I usually only get 3, maybe 4 days off, so everything has to come first: friends, family, and then my little project of Flight Deck to Sim. Anyway, I hope you have a great weekend. I hope your team does well in the World Cup. Ronaldo, well done for getting your 3 goals yesterday. My girlfriend's Portuguese, so she was very happy. Anyway, I digress. Have a great weekend, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.